in the Gulf of Alaska, although we should be arriving in College Fjord in about 2.5 hours. About 6 o'clock tonight we'll leave College Fjord and go into Prince William Sound.
The female is larger than the male. It's thought that this is to accommodate the nest and, of course, to have a larger body in order to carry the eggs. The wingspan of the female can be up to 8 inches in length. The male is slightly smaller. I'll keep a sharp eye out for eagles, harbor seals, and sea otters as we move toward the Harvard Glacier. To me, one of the most fascinating dynamics. You can see that point of land directly ahead of us. That's College Point. To the right is the Yale Glacier, and to the left is the Harvard Glacier. The Harvard Glacier is advancing, while the Yale Glacier is in a drastic retreat. While that might appear confusing, it's very easy to understand if you think in terms of ice fields, because both of those glaciers, Harvard and Yale, originate in an ice field, but not the same. And so the ice field that feeds the Yale Glacier is also the ice field that feeds the Columbia Glacier. That was in the Valdez Arm that we saw around noon today and responsible for those very large bergs of ice that were in the water. So that elevation is typically right around 3,000 feet. And that's where the precipitation is now falling in the form of rain rather than snow. So both the Yale and Columbia are in a drastic retreat. The Harvard, which its ice field originates at an elevation up above 6,000 feet, is putting on copious amounts of snow, and that's its savings account. So it's putting on much more snow than it's having off the face of the glacier. So that particular glacier is advancing. Some of you might have been worried about the weather and visibility as we moved into Prince William Sound. I never worry about the weather because I know that glaciers create their own microclimates or own climate zones. This is because of their very cold temperature along with the local high pressure systems that form over the glaciers, while the surrounding or the adjacent sound with its warmer water tends to have a lower pressure over it. And the difference in pressure causes the air to move from the area of higher pressure to that of lower pressure, and that creates these local glacial breezes, and it often opens up the sky just above the surface of the glacier. So even on a cloudy day, we always get a very good view of these exquisite glaciers that come cascading down the side of the mountain, giving us a very vivid impression of a torrent of water. You see lots of sunlight there on the surface of these glaciers. That is a special effect. It's called the albedo effect. And this is the light reflected by a glacier, and it actually magnifies the size of the glacier to your eye about 25%. You can see some of this effect even without the aid of binoculars. If you're looking at the face of the Vassar Glacier, look at those dark areas about midway up, and you can see that ice showing through, and that's just an extreme amount of glacial moraine that's ground into the face of the surface of that glacial ice. Because you hear a lot about being bear aware, and that depends really on the bear and how aware the bear is of you. Because in areas that are very, very remote, you might be the first human being that a bear has ever encountered. And a bear is actually a very intelligent animal, and so a very curious animal as well, and it's hardwired to eat. It's got to double its girth in the space of about 4 months in order to survive in that very long winter. And so an orange pup tent, if a bear has never seen another human being, can actually be something that will attract the bear to the campsite. And so we were wondering that particular day if those people had had any bear encounters. Of course, that wouldn't be the kind that you typically want to have, because a curious or advancing black bear can actually be a relatively dangerous bear, as opposed to the brown bear that more often than not any kind of charge would be a bluff charge. A black bear that invades your camp intends to make a meal of whatever it finds there, and that can include the camper. On the starboard side of the ship, we're now passing College Point, and that does separate the Yale Glacier from the Harvard Glacier. That's the Harvard Glacier you see now as we are moving down to the northernmost reaches of College Fjord. This area is going to be 1.5 miles wide from the College Point area into the area that, or the west shoreline that you see with the, our next glacier will be Bryn Mawr. And so that's 1.5 miles stretch across, including the face of the Harvard Glacier directly ahead of us. The face of that glacier is approximately 100 feet. My favorite glacier is coming up, and this is the Bryn Mawr Glacier that you see now at 10 o'clock. And why do I have a favorite? Because I can. I come in here every 2 weeks, and on that turnaround I see it within the space of 3 days, and over the course of 4 years, this is the glacier that I have learned to love the most. And that is because of the large amounts of water that I see coming down. I think I saw it calving just a moment ago. I don't have my windows open, but that rifle crack, again, that was the eruption of gas. As the face of that ice comes shearing off, and that gas is released, begins to split open and form those crevasses and the seracs. That eruption of gas can occur far beyond our range, or the distance that we can see. And so that was a tremendous mystery to the original explorers, trying to discover the origins of those rifle cracks when that ice shears off and those gases erupt. But the Bryn Mawr is by far my favorite glacier. It's a single glacier. It is a valley glacier descending from a cirque, but you can see those tributaries as they come down on either side of that rocky outcropping, and that's known as a nunatak, and it truly gives you the sense of a torrent of rushing water in its solid form. Now, as you can see where the tributaries begin to meet, you'll see that dark line coming down the center. That is known as a medial moraine. Remember that on either side of that river of ice, debris off to either side, and as those tributaries meet in the middle, some of that is trapped right in the central portion. And you can see as it moves down the side of the mountain under the force of gravity, one side is now tidewater while the other has retreated somewhat off of tidewater. And I look forward every summer, in fact from one day to the next, to see the source of the waterfalls that emerge from the very face of that glacier. If you look off to the right-hand side, you'll see that triangulation of snow that is you can see also where it comes down from that bald spot right in the central. You can see that little kind of rectangular area of black. Just fairly recently sheared off of that area. You can see where the snow slid down that incline at about 45 degrees, and then that triangulation right at the bottom. But that was a piece of calving ice, and often when we see the Bryn Mawr calve, it comes off, the ice comes right off of that central portion. We are continuing to move forward. We're advancing at 3.5 knots, and the depth is 108 meters. Well, that was magnificent. That is some of the most remarkable calving. That whole face of that piece of ice just sheared off the face of the right-hand tributary on the Bryn Mawr Glacier. That was absolutely amazing. Some of the best calving I've seen in 4 years in this area. Very visible. I can see them now. I don't even need my binoculars. So very shortly they'll be at about 9 o'clock. Again, look at that large piece of flat ice, and you'll see a couple of dark spots on that smaller berg just beyond it. It's just off the right-hand side of the ship. A couple of those delightful little sausages of the sea, the harbor seals. Harbor seals are non-migratory, so where they're born is where they die. It looks like we've got a little sea otter swimming just near them. We've got some more of them out there. I'm looking now at 1 o'clock, and you can see the range and the color of their pelage. And one of them looks like it's just about ready to slip into the water. And one was dark and one was light. And that is a female with her pup. You can tell by the larger size. So we've got a mother, and she just slipped in, as did her baby. So that was, you can see the concentric circles of water, and that was 2 harbor seals, a mother and her pup, slipping into the water. They're very curious. It's easy to distinguish a harbor seal from a stellar sea lion. First of all, there are no stellar sea lions in this area, but the harbor seals often look like little periscopes or little cocker spaniels without ears. They're very curious, but just the slightest disturbance can make them just pop right back beneath the water.
There's a seal just keeps popping up and down out of the water.
A little bit. You can see they're moving.
There you go. That one, those 2 on that little iceberg, remember? They're just unbaited.
Well, this is like pantomiming. So they're indicating there's something alive. They're rocking their arms. It looks like they're talking about a baby. 4 harbor seals. Oh, everybody's motioning at me. Paddling, swimming. Are they harbor seals or are they sea otters? I'm going to get my binoculars, see if I can't figure it out. Is it an eagle? No.
It's a whale.
Well, they're paddling. For the life of me, I'm not sure what it is, but everybody's smiling, everybody's pointing at about just to the left. Oh, they're telling me we've got some human out there. Yes, they're telling, yay! So I finally got it. Okay. Apparently we've got some kayakers out there. I haven't spotted them yet. 4 kayakers? Anyway, so lots of wildlife out there. And so that would be at about 1 o'clock. Now, if you're wondering how they got here, remember Whittier is only 43 miles distant, and so quite often you can get a small boat to bring you up into this portion, and from that point on, then you can spend an entire afternoon just exploring some of this exquisite scenery that you see today. You're on the starboard side, train your binoculars on the beach. At 2 o'clock, we have a black bear out there. This Captain Pomada that initially spotted it. Oh, passenger. Captain Pomada very graciously credited the passenger. But again, there's a beach out at 2 o'clock. Look for a black moving rock, and that is in fact a black bear. Spot this bear, but if you do, you'll have a bear sighting. Again, directly at 2 o'clock, you see all those green trees along the shoreline, and the central, right in the center of those trees, move right down to the water line, and you see that gray beach, and there's a black dot. I can even see it without the aid of binoculars because I know what I'm looking at. And so that little black dot, you watch it move around, and that's a little black bear that's foraging right along the coastline. Part of the day, and that being a black bear. The heat of the day, typically they like to take their nap, and it's called estivating, or they rest in the hot part of the day. But this is low tide right now, and that's an ideal time for these little bears to come down and they feast on the barnacles, which is a type of crustacean that's exposed at the low tide. He's disappeared up into the trees, but again, what a wonderful day. We've had sightings now of sea otters, we've had sightings of harbor seals. I heard just before I got up onto the bridge, we saw the spout of a couple of humpback whales, and now we've got a black bear on the beach. And as we move in toward this evening, as we leave, once we pass that Cog Hill Point and Point Pakenham, and that's in the distance, but once we pass that point, it's a wonderful opportunity to be looking for killer whales. We've got several ungulates, and that includes the moose, the Sitka black-tailed deer. In fact, it was back in 1965, I believe, that 24 Sitka black-tailed deer were translocated onto Hinchinbrook Island. Lots and lots of wildlife can be found all along the shoreline. Again, remember, 38 species of land mammals, 200 species of migratory birds. People often ask me, don't you ever get tired of doing this? Because I'm on for 4.5 months. How could I possibly get tired of this? I feel like the richest person on earth. It's a richness of spirit, this unsurpassed, spectacular beauty, the abundance of wildlife, and of course, all of you that I meet throughout the course of the week. And it's so much to what I call a richness of spirit. So I do consider myself to be very wealthy indeed. can see people pointing directly ahead. So if you are looking straight in front of the ship and as we begin to turn to the right, look for those elongated dark things on the surface of those little bergs, because those are harbor seals.
Man, they're crazy.
I know shit. We got a big ass cruise ship, and if this thing's, them kayaks are gonna have to be around by.
If you are looking to the aft of the ship, or particularly on the port side of the ship, we have engaged the ship thrusters, and that allows us to pivot. And you can see that extreme amount of glacial flour that is churned to the surface. And some people mistakenly think possibly we're putting something into the water. I can assure you that we are not. One of the things that I am most proud of, and I do live in the state of Alaska, so I was very picky as to which cruise line that I chose to affiliate myself with. Princess has some of the highest standards of any cruise line environmentally that you can find in Alaskan waters. And Alaska has some of the strictest laws regarding waters that you'll find anywhere on Earth. And so what you're seeing out here is we engage the thrusters, and you can see that brown coming up to the surface. And that's that large amount of glacial flour that's in the first 25 feet of water. And so as we do engage those thrusters, it stirs up that glacial silt, or that glacial flour, brings it right up to the surface, along with a lot of little microscopic organisms and crustaceans. And it was the result of some of that that you saw those black-legged kittiwakes when we were over in front of the Marjorie Glacier. We see that frenzy of birds feeding because, again, when it stirs up this glacial flour, it often creates an upwelling, and it brings a lot of nutrients right up to the surface of the water. For the final port of call, and that is Whittier. So be sure and be having that last look out your window, because that can be your best opportunity to see a killer whale in this area. An unparalleled coastline. Remember, Prince William Sound at 10,000 square miles contains 3,500 miles of coastline.
Oh, it's still falling from the middle now.